You are the Chief Executive Officer of FIDA during the post-election violence, and you received calls from victims of rape and sexual violence during that time. Kindly take me through that in terms of, were they phone calls? Did they come to you? What was the situation at the time in terms of dealing with these victims during that time?
Okay, just a short correction. At the time of the I later became the CEO of FIDA. That was in 2010. But at the time of the post-election, I was a senior program officer with FIDA. And information came to us in various ways. Women were ringing our offices directly. Some were being referred to us by medical providers and other people who were working in the camps. Because when these people went into the camps and found this was the situation, then they got in touch with FIDA. So the large number were referrals, especially by Red Cross, and there was FIDA Kenya. Yes. Yeah.
So in this kind of calls, when you got direct calls from the victims, what were they explaining?
Various cases, a number of women were saying they were in inter-ethnic marriages, and when the conflict arose, these women were being evicted away from their homes, or their spouses were not providing them with protection, and therefore exposing them to attack. Then there were reports now of women who had been sexually assaulted and could not get assistance, either medical or through the police station. There were women in the camps who were saying that while in the camps, they were being coerced into sexual relationships so that they would get tents allocated to them or would get supplies that were being made available. And it was under those circumstances then that they were seeking the intervention of FIDA.
And due to the nature of violence, most women could obviously not access medical assistance, like you said, let alone even report the matter to the police. What kind of first-hand interventions did FIDA do to ensure that they sought some medical assistance?
So we worked in Nairobi Women's Hospital. Really was very helpful for the women in Nairobi. I think the assistance was limited to the women in Nairobi. The challenge really was the women who, owing to the stigma, actually even for us as FIDA, it is when we got into the camps that we were struck at the magnitude of the problem. Because what had happened is that yes, women had been sexually assaulted, but owing to the stigma that is attached to rape, they had not disclosed. Because for the women who had disclosed, their spouses had abandoned them. So these women were here with, injuries such as oozing discharge, but they could not tell their partners or could not seek medical treatment because then their spouse would find out that they were defiled and then would abandon them. So for the sake of what one can say, the social security that you gain of having a husband, these women did not disclose their condition and therefore developed medical complications later in the day that maybe could have been helped earlier if it was not within our culture to stigmatize the victim and not provide the kind of support that these women needed. So then what FIDA did, I remember we worked very closely with FIDA Kenya then, was that then these women were provided the medical attention that they needed. It is just that it came very late. It came very, some of them, now were found to have HIV. Some had complicated STDs. Some had tears that were more complicated now because they had healed but wrongly. So you had to disturb the scar. It was really traumatizing to have to, now based on the medical, the reports, so the doctor saying yes, she had tears, but a scar had formed. So the process of healing would mean disturbing that scar so that to correct and to allow for her to heal well. Yeah, so it was, even for those of us who are dealing with it as professionals, it was really traumatizing. And you look back, because the truth of the matter is that apart from the fact that now these women have come to court to lay claims, the fact of the matter is that no help was available at all
At that time?
At that time, because there was a collapse of the justice system. So the police had not collected these reports. And for the crimes of this nature, the medical evidence, the case really rests on the medical evidence. So if we're saying the medical evidence was not collected, was not preserved, these women, in some instances, were raped by persons known to them. So there was the fear. Yeah, so if I am from one community and I am raising that the persons who raped me are from another community, there was a likelihood of a reflaring of the conflict. So it was, I remember the thought that bothered me heavily at that time was that there is no help forthcoming for these women. Apart from us really publicizing that this was happening, in terms of what these women needed, the magnitude of the counseling that was required, the support for their children, setting them up again. Because if you had been raped by somebody within the neighborhood, many of these women had to relocate. And that relocating really meant removing themselves. A number of these people were just small-scale business women. So their lives were disrupted to the extent that their very livelihoods. So wherever they went, I mean, even if you are moving from Kibera to Madare, you had to get another house, you had to get stock to get started again. That kind of help was not forthcoming. So it was really a season of distress for the women who found themselves in this situation.
And when Nairobi Women's Hospital intervened, when they were doing their medical assessments and found that some had conceived, did they or the organizations have provisions that they could terminate those pregnancies because they were out of rape?
So that's the crisis. That's the crisis, that termination of pregnancy in this country at that time is illegal. So a lady could not just walk into a medical provider's room and say, this pregnancy, I got it out of rape, I don't want it, can you please? Our laws do not allow for that. So one case, in fact, when women were being prepared for the Waki Commission, one woman's testimony was that she now had a child born out of the rape, and she was at a loss to explain to her other children that the father of these children was responsible for the death of their father. Yeah, because they slashed her husband and raped her. So she had born the child of the man who killed her husband. Did not allow her to terminate. This was because there are many, the people who argue against termination of pregnancy under these circumstances. I think our argument was let the wearer of the shoe decide, as to whether or not they should have to carry this pregnancy to term. The issue was really, could these women find their way to providers who understand and then would facilitate where the woman felt strongly that she was unable to carry that pregnancy. The truth of the matter is, my suspicion is that a number of women went for backstreet abortions, which then the risks the women exposed themselves to because of that lacuna in our law, then is again something we want to interrogate. I think the good thing is that the Constitution as framed now probably would allow, and that the medical provider then would have some kind of legal legitimacy if presented with this kind of a case.
Okay.
Yeah.
The women I've talked to for the past 2 weeks say that they have not received any assistance from, first of all, the government, and secondly, even from civil society organizations, who they say keep interviewing them. They keep giving information, but they are not, like the people who are supposed to intervene on their behalf are not helping them. This is, I'm quoting them directly. This is what they told me.
I would agree. I would really, really agree. Because, first of all, you see, all the government had to do was, in the same extent that we protected property during the crisis, measures ought to have been placed to protect people. So we made sure we didn't burn down buildings. But no one said, in a situation of outbreak of violence, where there is so much tension, so much animosity, it is very likely that women will get raped. There was nothing like that. The civil society can never take the place of government. Really, all that civil society, especially if we talk of the civil society within the governance sector, all that they could do was sensitize and raise awareness and inform government agencies that this was happening to the women during the crisis and even in the camps that had been set up. Responsibility for security, responsibility for provision of medical services always would rest with government. When we had people like Red Cross come in, when we had people like Care International come in, I think these were the major ones. They simply stepped in. Nairobi Women's Hospital. They simply stepped in, but they were doing the role of government. So I think one cannot discuss the matter further because there are cases pending in court that would determine what is the extent of the government liability. But I think this also highlighted that civil society can never take over from government. Government's responsibility is always government's responsibility. So that if I take the example of FIDA, I think we played our role to the extent that we documented that this was happening to women. We, for a short time, served in a task force that was meant to investigate the role of security agencies in this kind of violence. But beyond there, I mean, FIDA cannot provide the medical treatment that these women needed. FIDA could not provide for resettlement. All FIDA did was to say, this, in our estimation, is the magnitude of this problem, and these are the interventions that are required.
From what I gather from them, is like they keep getting people from civil society, maybe including FIDA, who keep asking them over and over again, which
and which is completely unacceptable. Because what happens is that we then re-victimize them.
That's the thing.
Yeah, these women are probably in the process of rebuilding their lives. In 2015, you show up again and say, tell me your story. There is a way in which those stories can be gotten from what is already documented. Yeah, I think where matters stand now, what these women need is action that restitutes them to the extent that it is possible. Yeah, I think the TJRC report again says what we needed as a country is public acknowledgement that women have been exposed to this kind of violation. And it is completely unjustified. I mean, you know, the other bigger issue we need to appreciate is that violence against women in this country and in other countries also has been normalized. Yeah, so that no one imagines that there is an extent to which there should be societal outrage